am Sanjay from Department of English, Maharaja Krishna Kumar Singh Ji, Bhavnagar University. As a MA coursework, I have been assigned a work of video essay analyzing the technical aspect of film studies. And for this task, I chose to closely examine the non-linear narrative structure from Rajkumar Hirani's film Sanju, which is came out in 2018. What follows is my own analysis, built after rewatching film closely and studying its actual dialogue and scene structure. Not a plot summary, but an argument about how this film is deliberately constructed and why.
Before going to direct film, let's see the film studies. So film studies isn't about judging whether a movie story is good, whether a character is likable, or what moral lessons it teaches. That is closer to literary criticism applied to a script. Film studies ask a different question. How does a film use the specific tools of cinema like editing, structure, camera, sound to construct meaning? A novel only has words. A film has words but also image sequencing, the order information is revealed in, and the physical construction of time itself through editing. That last one, how a film constructs the reordered times, is what I want to focus on today. A non-linear structure only works when the reordering serves a purpose, when it is built to create thematic connection or emotional tension, not just to look clever. If you cannot put a non-linear film back into simple chronological order and it doesn't lose anything, the technique wasn't doing real work. So the real question isn't just does the film jumps around in time, it is what does the reordering accomplish that a storytelling would not. That is the lens I am using today on Sanju, directed by Rajkumar Hirani. My central argument is this. Sanju constructs its narrative through a deliberate sequence of shifting, competing narrators, first Sanjay Dutt's own voice, then his friend Kamlesh's voice, filtered through fear and suspicion, and is withhold their reconciliation until the very end. I believe this structure works the audience through the same process of the doubt, investigation, and eventually belief that the film's biographer, Winnie Diaz, goes through on screen. The structure doesn't just tell the story, it recreates the experience of learning to trust it. What struck me on rewatching the opening is how much distrust is built before we even meet the real narrative. That reads from an existing ghost-written autobiography that clearly misrepresents him. Almost immediately, the film cut to news headlines. Sanjay Dutt को 5 साल की jail flashed at us before any context is given. Winnie Diaz, the real biographer, initially refused outright. I can't write your biography, I am sorry. Trust in this story has to be earned scene by scene, not assumed. The technical center of the film's design, in my analysis, is the shift from Dutt's own narration to Kamlesh. For a long stretch, we heard Dutt's warm, self-aware account of his youth, his addiction, and his friendship with Kamlesh. But then the film lets Winnie hear Kamlesh's version directly, and the narrative itself changes. And Kamlesh states explicitly, this story has 4 characters, Sanjay Dutt, Sunil Dutt, I, and the Babri Mosque. From this point, we hear the same events, the Babri Masjid demolition, the illegal rifle, the RDX rumors, filtered through a frightened friend who eventually says he is a bloody terrorist. This is not new information, contradiction old information. It is identical facts reframed by a narrator whose relationship to Dutt has fundamentally changed. Disturbed by Kamlesh's account, Winnie abandoned the project. Dutt is sentenced under the Arm Act and spent 452 days in custody, where the begins hosting a community radio program for a fellow inmates. What I find analytically significant is what happens next. Dutt's wife confronts Winnie for dropping his story in favor of a news report and hands her a smuggled recording of his prison broadcast. Winnie then visits Dutt directly and confronts him with the discrepancy between his account and Kamlesh. Only here, near the film's end, are the two competing versions finally placed in the same scene, spoken aloud and allowed to meet. I argue this delay is the film's real structural strategy. By withholding reconciliation until nearly the final act, Hirani forces the audience to sit inside the same uncertainty Winnie experiences. The eventually reunion closing with the line, "Let's go, Kamli," only lands emotionally because the film has spent almost its entire runtime denying us that resolution. So why I believe the director builds the film this way? My conclusion is that Hirani is not using nonlinear structure merely as style. The structure functions as an argument in itself. By tagging Dutt's public image as a first constructed by unreliable sources, a bad autobiography, hostile headlines, a frightened friend's fear, and only slowly reconstructing a fuller picture through competing, reconciling narrator, the film model exactly how it wants its audience to treat the real Sanjay Dutt's public reputation, not through immediate judgment but through delayed, careful reconsideration. I want to be critical here, not simply admiring. This structure is undeniably persuasive, not neutral. Delaying the reconciliation until the emotional high point of the film is calculated decision. The same technique that builds a satisfying narrative arc is also doing real work in shaping public sympathy for a real controversial figure. Recognition, the structure's sophistication does not require accepting it as an objective account. Broader implication. Stepping back, what my analysis shows is that nonlinear structure is not simply about disordering events in time. In Sanju, it operates through shifting narrator as much as shifting chronology. Its real power lies in controlling not just when we learn something, but whose voice we hear it through. That, in my view, is a more precise way of understanding non-linear narrative than a simply saying the story jumps around.
To conclude, my analysis of Sanju shows a film built around the deliberate delay and eventually convergence of two competent personal narrators, used to model an argument about how public judgment itself should be formed, slowly and only after account has had chance to speak. This is what I take from the film structure as a student of literature approaching cinema through the tools of narrative analysis rather than simple review. Thank you for watching.